Researchers unveil the food that is slowing memory loss for 10,000 seniors today. As a clinician who spent decades reading studies, seeing patients in clinic, and watching 1,000 well-intentioned health fads come and go, I don't hand out enthusiasm lightly. So when a body of research, pooled analyses involving roughly 10,000 older adults, keeps pointing to the same single food as being associated with a slower rate of memory decline, it's worth pausing to understand what's real, what's plausible, and what you can actually do about it. Before we go deeper, if you want the primary studies and pooled analyses I'm summarizing, I've put every reference in the description below. Check them as we go. I'll be careful in how I talk about the findings. Associated with and linked to are the right words here. This is not a miracle cure. It's a consistent signal from clinical research that adding this food into an overall healthy lifestyle appears to help preserve memory function over time. So what is the food? Extra virgin olive oil. Not a pill, not a powdered extract, but the unrefined, cold-pressed oil you find in the produce aisle, the one with a peppery finish if it's good quality. In multiple cohort studies and in trial-based analyses inspired by Mediterranean diet trials, higher intake of extra virgin olive oil is repeatedly associated with better cognitive outcomes over years of follow-up. In pooled analyses involving about 10,000 seniors, researchers observed that people who regularly consumed extra virgin olive oil tended to experience a slower rate of decline on memory tests than those who consumed little or none. That's the headline. Now let's unpack what that really means, why it might be happening biologically, and how to apply it safely and practically in everyday life. First, what do researchers mean by slower memory loss? In these studies, scientists follow groups of older adults over time and give them standardized cognitive tests at intervals, memory recall tasks, word lists, clock drawing, and other validated measures. When the average score drops more gradually in one group than another, researchers say the decline is slower. That's different from no decline or prevention of dementia. It means that, on a population level, higher intake of extra virgin olive oil was linked to a gentler slope of deterioration in these cognitive tests over years. That's still meaningful. Even a modest slowing can translate to preserved function for months or years, time that matters for independence and quality of life. But how could a single dietary fat do this? Several plausible mechanisms connect olive oil with brain health, and they're consistent across lab studies, animal models, and human research. Think of them like overlapping defenses: better blood flow, less chronic inflammation, antioxidant protection, and improved metabolic control. Each one is modest on its own. Together they add up. First mechanism, vascular support. The brain is metabolically hungry and extremely sensitive to blood flow. Extra virgin olive oil contains monounsaturated fats and compounds that favorably affect the lining of blood vessels. That helps keep small arteries pliable and reduces the sort of tiny injuries and scarring that impair oxygen delivery over time. Better vascular health means better sustained blood flow to memory-critical areas like the hippocampus. In populations where cardiovascular risk factors are better controlled, cognitive decline tends to proceed more slowly. Olive oil appears to be one tool in that toolkit. Second mechanism, anti-inflammatory and antioxidant actions. Extra virgin olive oil is rich in polyphenols, small plant molecules like hydroxytyrosol and oleocanthal. These aren't just fancy-sounding names. They act biologically to dial down chronic low-grade inflammation and to scavenge harmful oxidants that damage cell membranes and proteins. If you imagine oxidative stress as a kind of rust building up on neurons, polyphenols are the rust inhibitors. Chronic inflammation and oxidative damage are common pathways in age-related cognitive decline, so anything that nudges them downward is plausibly protective. Third mechanism, metabolic and synaptic support. There's growing evidence that metabolic health, insulin sensitivity, glucose control, and lipid balance matters for the brain. Extra virgin olive oil may improve insulin sensitivity modestly and reduce the production of harmful oxidized lipids. It also appears to influence molecules related to synaptic plasticity in animal studies, basically the molecular machinery that lets neurons form and maintain the connections we use to remember things. Translating animal data to humans requires caution, but when multiple lines of evidence point the same way, the hypothesis strengthens. What I want to emphasize is this. We're not saying olive oil single-handedly prevents dementia. We're saying reliable research involving thousands of older adults shows a consistent association between regular consumption of extra virgin olive oil and a slower trajectory of memory decline. That difference, even if small on an individual test, can be meaningful at the level of daily life. Okay, down to practicalities. If you're thinking, how much should I use? Does the type matter? Can I cook with it? Here are clear, clinically sensible recommendations grounded in the evidence and common dietary guidelines. A reasonable target for many seniors is about 1 to 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil per day. That's enough to deliver a useful dose of the polyphenols and healthy fats without excessively increasing daily calories if you balance other fats accordingly. 1 tablespoon is roughly 120 calories, so if weight control is a concern, prioritize swaps rather than additions. Replace butter or margarine with olive oil instead of adding spoonfuls on top of the usual diet. Quality matters.
Look for bottles labeled extra virgin, cold pressed, or first cold press. Dark glass or tins protect the oil from light. Avoid clear plastic bottles that let light and heat degrade the polyphenols. If the bottle has a harvest date, the fresher the better. Polyphenols diminish over time. Taste a drop. Good extra virgin olive oil will often have a peppery, slightly bitter finish. If it tastes flat or overly greasy with no peppery note, it may be old or refined. Cooking notes. Extra virgin olive oil is versatile. While some of its more delicate polyphenols are reduced at very high temperatures, moderate cooking, sautéing vegetables, roasting at modest oven temperatures, or pan-cooking proteins is fine and preserves a lot of the benefits. For raw uses, finishing a dish with a drizzle of high-quality Evo gives the most polyphenol bang for your buck, on salads, steamed vegetables, or even on a slice of whole grain toast instead of butter. Here are simple swaps and meal ideas that make implementation practical. Breakfast. Replace the butter on toast with a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil and a sprinkle of sea salt and cracked pepper. Or stir a tablespoon into plain yogurt with fruit and a dash of cinnamon. Lunch. Use a dressing of olive oil and vinegar over salads, or toss roasted root vegetables with a tablespoon before serving. Swap mayonnaise-based spreads for an olive oil-based smear on sandwiches. Snacks. Drizzle a little olive oil over hummus, or use it as a dip for whole grain crackers with a squeeze of lemon and a dusting of smoked paprika. Dinner. Finish grilled fish or steamed greens with a spoonful of extra virgin olive oil. Use olive oil instead of butter for sautéing mushrooms, bell peppers, or onions. A 1-week starter plan. Day 1, add 1 tablespoon of Evo to breakfast toast. Day 2, use Evo as salad dressing at lunch. Day 3, roast vegetables with a tablespoon of Evo for dinner. Day 4, substitute Evo for butter on a sandwich. Day 5, drizzle Evo over yogurt or soup. Day 6, make a simple tomato and olive oil bruschetta as a snack. Day 7, review how these changes fit into your routine and plan which swaps you'll keep. Safety and interactions. A few important clinical cautions. Extra virgin olive oil is calorie dense. If you're on a strict calorie budget for weight loss or have malnutrition concerns, account for those calories by reducing other fats or choosing lower calorie sides. If you take blood thinning medications, warfarin, dabigatran, apixaban, or similar, discuss any substantial dietary changes with your clinician. Olive oil has mild effects on platelet aggregation, which is generally safe in normal dietary amounts, but your prescribing clinician can advise based on your individual medication and bleeding risk. If you have specific conditions like congestive heart failure where fluid and caloric balance are delicate, get personalized advice. Now, a common skeptic question. Could the observed benefit simply be because people who eat olive oil also follow an overall healthier lifestyle, the classic healthy user bias? That's a fair point. Observational studies can't fully eliminate that concern. Researchers account for many confounders: age, education, exercise, smoking, baseline health markers, but residual confounding can remain. That's why findings from cohort analyses are most compelling when they're supported by randomized trials that attempt to isolate the dietary component. In this case, trial data inspired by Mediterranean diet interventions, where olive oil is a central component, do suggest cognitive benefits, especially when the diet is adopted as a whole. So the plausible picture is that extra virgin olive oil contributes meaningfully within a pattern of overall healthy eating and lifestyle. Which brings me to context. Nutrition rarely works in isolation. The food is one part of a strategy that includes physical activity, sleep quality, social engagement, cognitive stimulation, and good medical management of vascular risk factors, blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol. If you're able to combine a diet that includes extra virgin olive oil with regular moderate exercise, adequate sleep, engagement in mentally stimulating activities, and management of chronic diseases, the cumulative effect is likely greater than any single action. For caregivers and family members, small, consistent changes are often easier to sustain than big overhauls. Swap oils in the kitchen, add a finishing drizzle to favorite dishes, and gradually incorporate olive oil into regular meal patterns rather than expecting dramatic, immediate effects. These small steps reduce friction and raise the likelihood of long-term adherence, which is where benefit accumulates. Let's be concrete about what to avoid. Don't fall for supplements marketed as concentrated olive oil polyphenol pills that claim to cure dementia or restore memory. The evidence supports dietary patterns and foods themselves more than unregulated supplements. And don't interpret these findings as permission to ignore other medical advice. If you have suspected mild cognitive impairment or dementia, follow your clinician's plan for monitoring, medications if indicated, and lifestyle recommendations. One practical question I hear is any olive oil acceptable? No. Refined vegetable oils marketed as olive oil but lacking the extra virgin designation are not equivalent in polyphenol content. Labels that say pure olive oil or light olive oil often indicate refined products with lower beneficial compounds. Choose authentic extra virgin olive oil from reputable producers, stored in dark bottles, and ideally with a harvest date. Another practical question, what about taste and cost? High-quality extra virgin olive oil can be more expensive, but you don't need to use it for every frying or high-temperature application.
Use it where the flavor matters. Dressings, finishing, low to medium heat cooking, and reserve less expensive cooking oils for high heat tasks if needed. A small bottle of good EVO often lasts a month or two if used daily in modest amounts. Now a reality check. What if you're already on a Mediterranean-style diet or using olive oil regularly? That's good news. You're likely already getting the benefit that research points to. The studies don't require extreme changes. They often contrast habitual users of EVO with non-users. If you're not using it, consider adding it. If you are, keep going as part of a balanced approach. What if you don't like the taste of olive oil? You can still incorporate it into foods where the flavor is masked. Stir it into tomato-based sauces, blend it into marinades, or use it in vinaigrettes with lemon and mustard. Alternatively, focus on other components of a brain-healthy diet. Lots of vegetables, whole grains, nuts, fatty fish, and legumes. Olive oil is a strong candidate for inclusion, but dietary patterns overall matter more than any single ingredient. One final caveat worth repeating. These findings are associations, not promises. They point to a real, reproducible signal in multiple analyses, including pooled data involving approximately 10,000 older adults, that regular consumption of extra virgin olive oil is linked to a slower rate of decline on cognitive tests. That's important, but it's not the same as guaranteeing prevention of dementia or reversal of established disease. If you have memory concerns, the right step is to have a frank conversation with your clinician. Get baseline cognitive testing if recommended, review medications that might affect cognition, assess vascular risk factors, and consider a holistic plan that includes diet, exercise, sleep, social engagement, and cognitive activities. Before I close, let me answer a couple of practical FAQs I hear often. Q. Can I take an olive oil supplement instead of using the oil in food? The evidence favors consuming the food itself. Many of the beneficial compounds in olive oil are fat-soluble and behave differently in a food matrix than in isolated supplements. If a supplement is being considered, discuss it with your clinician and look for products backed by clinical studies, but note that most research supports dietary consumption. Q. Is 1 tablespoon enough? 1 tablespoon daily is a reasonable, achievable target that fits into most meal patterns. 2 tablespoons may confirm more of the olive oil's compounds, but also adds calories, so make swaps rather than additions. Q. Will cooking destroy the benefits? Some delicate polyphenols are reduced at high heat, but moderate cooking preserves much of the benefit. Use high-quality EVO for dressings and finishing when possible, and for sautéing at moderate temperatures. It's still better than many heavily processed oils for most everyday cooking. I'm on anticoagulants. Should I avoid olive oil?
Not necessarily, but discuss it with your prescribing clinician. Dietary amounts are usually safe, but any significant change in diet warrants a clinical check when medications that affect bleeding are involved. To wrap up, if you're worried about memory, adding extra virgin olive oil into a balanced dietary pattern is a low-risk, evidence-informed step that has been associated, in pooled research involving around 10,000 seniors, with a slower rate of memory decline. Think of it as one practical, tasty ingredient in a broader strategy that includes physical activity, good sleep, social connection, cognitive engagement, and solid medical care for vascular risk factors. If this message resonates, check the description for the specific studies and pooled analyses I referenced. Every paper is linked there so you can read the primary sources yourself. If you try adding extra virgin olive oil into your routine, tell us in the comments which easy swap you started with. Swap the butter on toast, finish your salads with EVO, or make that roasted vegetable recipe you've been putting off. And if you want more evidence-based, no-hype updates about diet, aging, and practical steps you can take, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future breakdowns. One short medical reminder before you go. This information is educational and not a substitute for personalized medical advice. If you have existing health conditions, are taking medications, especially blood thinners, or have specific dietary restrictions, consult your healthcare provider before making substantial changes. Thanks for staying skeptical and curious. Small, consistent changes backed by good data are often the most powerful.